There are some people who are looking further ahead, to the mid and the long-term future. They're concerned with the shape of the railway in the 21st century. Foremost amongst them are the scientists and the engineers of British Rail's Technical Centre at Derby.
British Rail has its own research division based at Derby. Here, behind the day-to-day running of the railway, it researches new ideas and uses modern methods such as computer-aided design to look into every aspect of railway engineering. Developments in computers have allowed the creation of the Integrated Electronic Control Centre, which employs a special program capable of controlling signalling in the face of service alterations, automatically calculating the most efficient way of returning to the schedule. So, as the new technologies of the 21st century merge with the best of the existing ones, the railways will continue to evolve to meet the changing demands of the future.
Or will they? Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away, tonight we are talking about the appalling, drivelous mess that is the GBR AI Industry Action Plan, released earlier this year, seeing what we can pick out of it that is perhaps useful, and what more we can pick out of it that is instructive about the direction of Britain's railways. The document has been created by a newish body called GBRX. So before we talk about the AI Industry Action Plan, we have to talk about GBRX. And before we talk about GBRX, we have to talk about British Rail Research. This was a body that was set up in 1963 amidst the UK's wider white heat of technology push under the person who would become Prime Minister. He would lead Labour to a victory on the premise of the language used in that speech, the optimism that he painted with his white heat of technology speech. Admittedly, it was a push that was largely abandoned a decade later. See also the scrap heap of various technology projects that we got so far and then abandoned. But, BR Research brought together lots of previously disparate bits of railway research and development estate under, well, not quite one roof, but centralised it, for the most part, in Derby. Here at the Railway Technical Centre. And you got a hint of some of the things it was up to in the late 80s in the opening video earlier. Whilst it did plenty of wacky stuff, its list of actual innovations that are still in use today and change the railway is long. Let me list a few. Early development of radar-based object detection, traffic flow simulation for networks, signal repeating AWS, remote control low-speed locomotives, induction drive vehicle traction, overhead electrification, design improvements deployed on West Coast modernisation, time-based rather than event-based traffic simulations through complex junctions, the plasma torch, sandite for railhead adhesion improvements, digital simulation of overhead electrification, dynamic behaviour, individual self-powered container carrying wagons that could automatically load, transverse the rail network and unload. That sounds familiar. Listen to Transatlantic. High-speed freight wagons, vampire vehicle simulation modelling, ballast behaviour during tamping, dynamic effects of substrate under high-speed traffic, track buckling behaviour, metal fatigue and cold treatment, ultrasonic inspection and flaw detection, solid-state interlocking, automatic route setting, real-time operating systems, and the Integrated Electronic Control Centre. In the latter case, well, that's quite a mouthful. In the latter case, this might well have been BR Research's greatest achievement, and one of its biggest missed opportunities. The UK could have cornered the market in digital signalling, but more on that later. BR Research became recognised as a centre of excellence in its field, and so too did British Rail and the British Railway Network at large. The theoretical rigour of BR Research's approach to railway engineering superseded the ad hoc methods that had prevailed previously. And so it had to be destroyed by privatisation, which it was in the late 1980s, with nothing at all to replace it. Innovation on the GB Railway has never got close to the same pace since. But is that about to change? Because GBRX was created in early 2025 with little explanation of what it was supposed to be other than a nexus of railway innovation. Was the chance being taken with GBR to recreate what was lost with the demise of BR Research? Well, to find out, we now have to talk about Tufik Mashnook. Tufik has been an NR person his whole professional life, working on various projects in and around their systems integration domain since the start of his career in 2006 as a graduate. Always as a project or program manager, though not as a technical guy. Off the back of early work on Crossrail signalling integration, he left before that mess was fully exposed, Tufik was appointed to the leadership of the East Coast Digital Programme in 2017, with tender award 3 years later in 2020. This was the scheme to install ETCS up the East Coast Main Line from King's Cross right up to York and beyond in a nominal rolling programme of signalling upgrades. He also found himself in increasingly lofty roles alongside his oversight of ECDP, including Director of Industry Partnership Digital, in 2021, taking over a kind of a GB-wide view of future ETCS rollout. And most recently, with the appointment to the role of Managing Director of GBRX. Throughout this period, he has been increasingly close with the now Rail Minister, Peter Hendy, who at the time of Tufik's escalations was Chair of Network Rail. Remember that. So there's the quote here about GBRX that comes from Lord Hendy. You can see where they've kind of clone tool wiped out his NR chair badge, by the way, when they've used this graphic for the GBR thing. That's exactly why we created GBRX, to challenge and accelerate change, to break the pattern of slow adoption that has historically held our railways back. Much of that delay is due to fragmentation, contractual complexities, and the way our system operates. GBRX is our solution to overcoming these barriers, helping to modernise the railway faster and embrace new technology more effectively. GBRX is here to make that happen, operating under Shadow GBR for now and eventually as part of GBR itself. And in the coming months, you'll see even more progress as we move forward. Oh, big words. How much of that is manifested into reality? Well, we'll see momentarily. Over the years, Tufik has styled himself as the railway's kind of high-tech guru, adopting the fashion and interpersonal skills of the tech elite. And now here he is, in a lead role of a nebulous new body with a sizable budget, a rapidly increasing headcount, and a propensity to outsource thinking to expensive consultants. Conveniently timed with the ongoing collapse of the East Coast Digital Programme itself, bloated with a massive headcount, huge consultancy fees from outsourcing everything, and a £100 million bill for a single Class 66 fitment that failed because they couldn't get the roof back on. And don't criticise the project, otherwise Tufik will get Hendy to call your boss and you'll get blacklisted from future press events. Sound familiar? Anyway, in May 2026, Tufik was sacked as boss of East Coast Digital Partnership, which he still was. Ignore the various kind of shufflings that were going on behind the scenes. That was still what he was tasked with delivering, digital railway up the East Coast Main Line. The far more practical Lee Van Finney has taken up the reins from engineering services, and hopefully he will, Lee Van will stop the whole thing flying off the cliff. As of the time of recording, that was May, this is now August, this has not been announced at all, and the only public evidence of it is the fact that Lee Van has put it on his LinkedIn. So no public discussion at all of the demise of Tufik in his ostensible primary role. Meanwhile, what is GBRX up to? What even is it? What has it spent the last year and a half doing? Well, that's why we have to turn to the AI action plan. Because this is it. GBRX has been around since the start of 2025 and it has done nothing. Go to their website, this is all you will see. Attend their talks and seminars, nothing. It's an entirely empty vessel and it's all about pretending the railway is the tech industry. And amidst the increasing clarity around what GBR will be, thus far a rebranding of the franchise system with more power being moved to Treasury than ever before, looking at the AI action plan, a document that Hendy has personally championed, will tell us a lot about the direction of the railway industry. Of the whole 93-page document, there's a double-page spread that is most instructive on this front. In its own words, this plan draws on learning from organisations across the sector and beyond whose perspectives, experiences and case studies have helped shape its understanding, priorities and direction. So the direction of railway innovation is being set by Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM, OpenAI, Palantir, and Disney? But more on that in just a tick. Last week, the West of England line had its timetable slashed thanks to the latest of 2026 heat waves and the degraded earthworks supporting the track. However, as we've explained already, this isn't as much an engineering resilience problem as it is a timetable resilience problem. The 100-plus kilometres of single line between Salisbury and Exeter make running a responsive timetable extremely difficult. And with the growth on the line, passenger growth is pretty substantial, leaving it like this is increasingly untenable. Tonight, for the bonus, we'll be looking at what redoubling the line looks like, whether the roughly 1.4 billion quid it will cost would be worth it, and what more you could do along the line in the process to turn the route from a backwater branch line into a mainline connection from London to the economic and tourist hubs of the Southwest. Some news, and we are talking about timetables once more, and we're talking about Hendy again, because Hendy was up in front of an APPG of some description, all-party parliamentary group, I can't remember which one, talking about, it's in this Rail article, you can go and have a look, basically talking about the fact that there is an obligation for the Transport Secretary to publish a long-term rail strategy, which will hinge on, and I quote, what the government and the country wants for the railway in line with the government's economic, political and social roles. Yes, we know, we've been waiting for it desperately. Hendy went on. So looking at what services are needed and what can be realistically provided with the track capacity and the rolling stock that there is, I think that looking further at those things by an organisation that isn't constrained to franchising might produce a different answer. I can't promise it, but that's the sort of thing that I would expect a holistic look on the major main lines to produce. What more can you squeeze out of the West Coast Main Line? It's full. What's kind of worrying is that he then goes on and starts talking about direct services to like Sheffield, and then starts talking about open access. He said, well, maybe a future railway might have come to a different answer. Which, remember that he's a millionaire because of First Group, and again, you have to question his motives in suggesting actually that the wrong decision has been made by the RR, and that maybe there should be more open access on an extremely congested long distance mainline. It's already baffling that Lumo got their Stirling service in, running diesel under the wires for every meter of the journey. I just, very puzzling. The comments came at a time when Avanti West Coast is cutting 12% of its summer services between July 20th and August 28th, though it expects an increase in leisure travel, particularly at weekends. Meanwhile, on the East Coast Main Line, journeys are up nearly 50%, and LNER reckons that that's because there's just a lot of extra capacity in the new timetable, and that is driving demand. It's not rocket science. And then Hendy then bizarrely goes off on one about ticketing and said, we started on LNER. I think if you book early enough and book the right trains, it won't make any difference. It might even turn out to be cheaper, right? And we've started that in the city regions as well with pay-as-you-go. But we've got to do far more of it, because a railway system with 50 million fares is not an intelligent railway system. He's just talked about making fares more complicated, having more demand-responsive fares. You have to do one or the other. You either make them, to make fares simpler, you have to make them broadly cheaper. You cannot, and to make them cheaper, without impacting on revenue, you have to make them more complicated. It's a fairly straightforward equation. Anyway, more deck chair rearrangements being proposed. Meanwhile, in the real world, while we faff about with the railway in decline, an ECIU study, basically it's a YouGov have basically gone out and done some work, and they found that 3/4 of media coverage of the June heatwave did not mention climate change at all, whereas YouGov found that 71% of Britons think climate change was a likely cause of the high temperatures. So British people, 71% of them thinking that that climate change was likely to have been a factor in the heatwave, which they're spot on about. And meanwhile, 3/4 of media coverage of the June heatwaves didn't mention climate change. This is a remarkably damning indictment of our press and its representation of people's actual interests and worries. Also, 2,700 of us died in the heat waves in May and June, let alone the July ones and the August ones and the blah, blah, blah. Folks, this is bad. Also, thanks to Met Office and other modelling, allows us to see that the human-induced climate change added 3 to 4 degrees to the heat wave. We know that 1,100 of those deaths are directly attributable to climate change. It is literally killing people in Britain right now. And the industry is responding to that. Eurostar's new double-decker trains are going to be modified to cope with temperatures up to 55 degrees, whereas they were previously. It's also funny. These are called Celestias, Celsius Celestia. That's kind of a funny thing going on there. Anyway, Alstom was originally going to bring these trains out in 2031, and they were going to cope with temperatures up to 45 degrees Celsius, but they're going to now be modified to do with another 10 degrees on top of that, thanks to the increasing battling heat waves that these trains are going to have to deal with as they cross, particularly into the European mainland. It means that they're going to have beefier aircon, which means quite dramatically greater hotel power being consumed by these trains, which means power supply upgrades required, which means it does high speed one have enough juice in the wires. Thoughts on a postcard on that one? Related to the Channel Tunnel is the fact that ScotRail, as of today, at the time of recording, which is Tuesday, a working group has been established by Caledonian Sleeper to consider, as was promised, I think, as a manifesto promise, sending sleeper trains through to mainland Europe. A working group has met for the first time to deliver a feasibility study, so it's not actually promising anything, it's just a study and a study and a study, examining the potential very loose wording, for a direct Caledonian Sleeper service to mainland Europe. My belief at this point is that it will fizzle out. It'll be determined as being too complicated. But let's see what happens. It's always good to see what these things have to say. I've mixed feelings on sending sleepers through the channel. I think that if you can fit them in freight paths and they're not getting in the way of anything else, why not? In the same breath, I'd far prefer very cheap. The sleeper is a very expensive service. I'd far prefer that we were conveyor belting far more high-speed services through that piece of spectacular infrastructure. And keep your eyes peeled. More on that. I'm going to be concluding some work on that this week. Keep your eyes peeled, because there's some interesting stuff I have to say about that coming out soon. But is it the return of Night Star? No, probably not. While we're in Europe, car dependence in Europe again, it's just this graph that I spotted from the Occo Institute, which is interesting, because it's pointing out the share of the population that either use public transport less than once a month or never. So it's picking up people who just basically never use public transport. Obviously, the UK has disappeared into thin air there because, Brexiting. But what's really interesting is that Italy and France feature a huge percentage of people who just never use public transport. That's very interesting to me. Spain doing far better. It's a very interesting... Norway doing very well. It's a very, very interesting graphic, this one. Rather than going, well, isn't it great that we have this mode share, it's going, well, what percentage of people are just never using public transport, are never finding public transport interesting or useful or fitting with their livelihoods? That, for me, is a very interesting bit of data. And I'd love to dig into that further. I'd love there to be a UK version of that data set. If there is, shout, tell me. Friend of the show, Adam Tranter here, has been out on his travels and has been spotting little buses. And I love these little buses. So it's saying every city should have these cute little electric buses. And I solidly agree. Cute little buses. Have them everywhere. Look, there's a little space inside the little bus. It's not too bad. Space for, it's got a disabled access ramp. This is exactly what you put into your car-free cities is little buses. Have them absolutely everywhere. You can paint them pink. They're very cute. They can be fully electric because they're tiny. The tinier they are, the easier the better they run on batteries because they don't load the batteries too hard. Look at these cute little monkeys. Fab. I'm all for these. Brilliant little thing. They should be everywhere. They should just, York should just have these whizzing around in the centre of the city. All for them. Brilliant. I love them.
One of the biggest things this government is doing is putting more power back into the hands of local communities. For too long, many decisions have been made in Westminster by people who don't know the challenges different areas face every day. We're changing that. We're giving more powers to local mayors and leaders so they can make decisions that are right for the people that they represent. Take buses, for example. Instead of services being decided by private operators, local leaders can decide the routes, the timetables and the fares, making sure that buses actually work for the people that rely on them. That means better connections, more reliable services, and public transport that's designed around your local community. We're already seeing it at work in places like here in Greater Manchester, and coming soon to places like South and West Yorkshire. At the end of the day, the people who know an area best are the people who live and work there. Giving local communities more control means better decisions, better transport, and more opportunities for everyone.
I mean, nothing to disagree with there. Heidi Alexander talking about this a bit as well. A couple of things here. Firstly, a lot of what's been talked about here is just a continuation of original Tory plans, bus back better type things. Great. The locally funded transport schemes up to 500 million no longer needing Whitehall approval is interesting to me. That is interesting. I'm very curious to know exactly what that looks like, but that is potentially valuable. Not least because, rightly, I hope that will make schemes that involve an annual rolling programme of funding possible. Because that 500 million should be, oh, cool. Well, the size of our project is going to be this then. And then this. And then this. And you keep your project within 500 million and you just keep delivering it. That, to me, is potentially quite interesting. What the actual nuts and bolts of it are, what the actual relationship with central government on that one really is, and the relationship with Treasury and that 500 million I'm very interested in, but curious and cynical about. But that potentially is very, very interesting, and fair play, that could be big. There's also some devolution going on at a broader level as well. The ability to retain more business rates, I believe, for local authorities is also good, positive. So some small fry stuff. This is not seismic. It's small fry, but someone actually having the conversation saying there should be some relinquishment of centralized power is not a bad thing. So watch this space, but some small rays of sunshine in amongst the general misery here. This is a good one. Merseyrail is going to be state-owned, and I hope brought into public ownership, and I hope specifically and directly by Liverpool City region to retain its branding and retain to be honest, they need to develop a Liverpool City region identity. They haven't done that yet. Mersey Travel obviously exists, but it's very bitty. I hope they develop their own identity and roll that out, because it's all very well just saying these are our trains, but they need to be part of a bigger story. And frankly, Liverpool is not doing a good enough job of having a coherent story on transport. The huge development happening on the waterfront are essentially public transport free, other than the idea of putting in a few bendy buses. It's not good enough. But again, this is something. It's some level of coherence, and again, it means hopefully that it won't be smashed up with the horrible GBR. The generic GBR branding. It will be its own identity, its own powerful multimodal identity as TfL gets. And there's also some comments here from Burnham himself while giving a bit of a sort of speech around his bus fare cap specifically. The Prime Minister has told Bristol Live he will fund the billions needed for a mass transit system for Bristol, Bath and the west of England, saying he wanted to create integrated functioning public transport which will help grow the economy in the region. This is what you kind of said. It's not as committal as that. So let's have a listen. I think some initial funding has been given to start the work to look at options. I missed doing voices. People shouted at me when I did voices, and I loved it. The West of England got £750 million, which I think is the most ever and a sign of our commitment. But more would be needed, obviously, to deliver mass transit. Yes, in the long run, I want to put that investment in so that all cities have integrated functioning public transport, supporting people into jobs and growing the economy. The evidence from Greater Manchester is really clear. We had a decade of above average growth, partly because we had a transport system that could support a growing economy. If you want growth, you have to make the investment to get it. I mean, spot on. Where's that investment coming from, though? Is that central government investment? Because it shouldn't be. It should be Bristol. Here is money. Spend it how you like, and we will not tell you off. That's your money now. So mixed feelings on that, and also, it's continuing our theme from quite a number of episodes ago. And we were chatting to Mariam about the fact that we want to make transport political again. I want leading politicians. That's the Prime Minister saying the thing. He's saying the transport thing. He's saying it. And if he says it, it means we can hold him to account on it. I don't think I ever heard Starmer talking about this sort of thing. Briefly Rachel Reeves did when she was squiggling out lines on a map and writing the word tram, despite the fact that her central government was the one who'd got in the way of it. So, again, tentatively positive about this. And, we know there's just an unending supply of evidence about the fact that trams, and indeed more than trams, frankly, are necessary for big cities. I mean, trams are necessary for medium-sized cities. Samuel Bancroft of The Exchange, I think that The Exchange is a new Leeds publication. Well worth going and having a look at them. Samuel Bancroft, someone tell me who owns it anyway. Samuel Bancroft has done some number crunching for a new article, which is well worth having a read. Since the 1950s, Leeds has got bigger, but the city has effectively shrunk. Because the public transport network of 1957 is that much larger than it is today, it actually put 450-ish thousand of today's residents within 30 minutes of Briggate. The network that actually exists today only reaches 256,000 people. So that means the city has essentially got smaller. And the areas that have lost the most in terms of public transport accessibility are Middleton, Belle Isle, Hunslet, Hare Hills and Chapeltown. In 1957, the city's best infrastructure catered to its poorest residents. Today, the opposite is the case. Oh, it's almost as if we did an episode on this, a bumper 2-hour Leeds episode for our 300th. The Leeds episode, well worth diving in. Anyway, that was only about a week ago that Samuel wrote that. Leeds borrowed its tram network. Did it shrink the city? Well worth diving in, having a look. It looks like a very nice bit of local news work going on. So all for it. Samuel, give us a shout. A pleasure. Nice bit of work you've done there. Network Rail issued some letters. Don't flipping do this, everyone. This letter says, this is in Cardiff, community relations, being sent out to a railway neighbour. Dear neighbour, railway work near your home. It's not even It's not even a mail merge, it's just a single letter they printed out loads of and delivered manually, presumably. Railway work near your home, rail adjusting at Llwyn. Please enter letter content here, ... Yours sincerely, Community Relations. So I have a number of things to complain about here. Number one, don't just have generic community relations. Have a human. Have a human that the person can then know that they're speaking to. Don't just have generic community relations. There is someone in a team who is at a level of responsibility where they should have their name against this letter, so that when you receive a letter explaining that the railway is doing some stuff that might piss you off, you have a human who has told you it, and they've explained why. Secondly, check your mail merge, folks. Do not ever, ever, ever send a letter that has a generic content placeholder. What are we doing here? This is deeply embarrassing. So, Wales and Western, Nick, find out who did this and give it meat with no biscuits. This is shoddy work. And, you know, Wales and Western under Nick Millington. Nick Millington's a very good person in my experience, a good person in the railway. Really cares about the railway and does a lot of good stuff. This doesn't do him any credit. And I'd recommend that this gets fixed and to some apologies. This is a really good example of very bad relations with our neighbour relationship development and stakeholder management. Extremely poor. Talking of getting things wrong, this is an interesting one. HS2 extension, there's BBC covering that the HS extension, a tunnel extension specifically, did not have permission, court rules. Well, specifically, Lord Justice Holgate has said that a tunnel extension in the West Midlands and a portal that was authorised by the 2017 Act did not map onto the planning permission that that was later not, or the planning permission that was gained and then did not incorporate the extension. So the tunnel's construction was authorised. The western portal was to be in Washwood Heath, next to the depot, and the eastern portal would be in Castle Bromwich. Both of these were located within the Birmingham City Council area. During 2020, HS2 decided the tunnel should be extended to the east by a further 3 kilometres. So the tunnel would have an overall length of nearly 6 kilometres, double the length of the original tunnel. The tunnel's eastern portal will be constructed further to the east so as to emerge in Water Orton, which is not under the City Council. This is not within the planning permission. But I'm kind of like, well, so what? What are we going to do? Fill the tunnel in? I don't get it. What does this gain anyone? Who's gained by this, and how is this useful? I agree it's not good that HS2 screwed up their permissions and cracked on. In the same breath, I don't understand what's the remedy here? What's the useful remedy that helps anyone? I don't know. Strange one. And pertinently, given the topic we're discussing tonight, but I suppose a positive one, which is that the slow march continues. ETCS has indeed arrived at long last on the East Coast Main Line proper. I think well into Hitchin have now got is now having ETCS rolled out on it. We've long given up on putting ETCS into central London or certainly to King's Cross, but it is now on the actual proper East Coast Main Line. Yes, very interesting to see how that goes, and interesting to see whether we hit the next deadline now that Levan is in place. Let's see. I'll be watching with interest because this is actually still the future, even if the programme itself has been, up till May at least, a bit of a shambles. Let's see. So let's take a look at this thing. We'll take a slightly different approach this time with our PDF page turn, as this whole thing is annoyingly in landscape, so I can't sell it up my face next to it so easily like I normally do. So instead I'm going to pull out lots of the pages, but not all of them, and then zoom in on things that I think are interesting, sometimes literally. If I want to show you a whole page, it'll be pretty obvious that it's a whole page. Anyway, the structure of the document is as follows. You've got forward, exec summary, you have the context, methodology, barriers and challenges, a load of other middle chapters, then it rounds out with the closing statements. There's a load of stuff. We'll kind of go through each of these chapters and talk about what they are. But there's not, frankly, much here. If you're wondering the extent to which Hendy has decided to be all over this, by the way, he's given it a gushing double-page forward that, of course, says very little. I'll ignore the exec summary, and then we will start in the pits of context, or at least their interpretation of it. And here it is. It starts with a bit of purpose, but this purpose section says notably little. In fact, It talks about, creating GBR, coinciding with a period where artificial intelligence is advancing at a remarkable pace. Is it? The convergence of these shifts make this a consequential moment. It's a big load of gibberish. Line of sight, saying government has set policies about AI. Yeah, we know that. We know why. It's because the Tony Blair Institute's all over it, and was all over the Starmer administration, which was the government, of course, the Prime Minister, of course, when this document came out, was the Starmer. We've changed Prime Minister since. I'm curious to see what happens. We'll touch briefly on that a little bit later. Anyway, so there's an alignment of the government objectives, fine. And then we go into, industry, environment, and ecosystem. Okay, so basically going like, what are the things that, here are different ways the rail industry works. And then we get this section, 1.4, why AI and why now? I'm going to zoom in on this bit because this is interesting. It has some good principles, right? But in the classic kind of tech industry bait and switch, none of them have any bearing on AI, and AI can do nothing to resolve them. So what are these three kind of points that we picked up? The first is demand for passenger freight services is near the limits of the system's capabilities. Yeah, absolutely. We're running out of capacity in the railways. That's absolutely true. A significant proportion of the workforce is approaching retirement. That is also absolutely true. We have a sizable chunk of the workforce leaving the industry or being told to leave the industry in voluntary redundancy. And it's not being backfilled. We're losing a huge amount of skill and knowledge of how to run a railway. And the last of these is the railway has embedded fiscal constraints, as in we have, ignoring the external pressures from Treasury. This is just saying that industry productivity is around 25% lower than a decade ago. Now, why is that? Well, it's because we had COVID and everyone across the railway was being run on the goodwill of the people who were on the front line primarily. And that goodwill has been run thin by modernisation, rabbit ears, by industrial action across other means, and also by COVID. Changed people's perspectives a lot on family life, on the balance of work and non-work life. So we're in a different era, a different epoch on that front. And the rail industry, rather than going, well, it's difficult, we have to have less railway as a result, it should be, well, no, we need the railway. The railway has a purpose. It's good. It has a different cost profile now, and that is the reality. And of course, you get the classic, funding competes with wider national priorities. Well, that's always been the case. The point is that it doesn't have to. That is political choice, not an economic reality. So, yeah. However, there we go. How is AI resolving any of these? Well, let's see what they say, shall we? So, AI overview. What are we learning here? So, this page is interesting because this is really a description, a bit of a storytelling piece on what AI actually is. And there are a few things I want to pull out here. So, the first of these is in this section is 6 things that it is putting under AI, that it's calling AI, of which classic machine learning is not AI. Natural language processing, LLMs, yes, I'll accept that being called AI under the current accepted kind of common use of AI. Computer vision, not AI. Optimization simulation, no, that's just computer. Generative AI, yes, sure, that is absolutely, that is certainly AI. So we've got, and then agentic AI. So things that are actually AI, we have generative AI and agentic AI. These other things aren't really, okay, you've got large language models, but kind of deep learning, but actually those, they're not really, the large language model use that we see today is generally, I would put under generative AI. So that's 2 out of 6 things that I would actually call AI. And I think this is important because by scooping up a load of things that the rail industry has been doing for multiple decades, see our episode recently that we did on plain line pattern recognition, and that technology, that is computer vision that we've been using for a very long time. One Big Circle will be doing this for a long time. None of that is new, and it is not AI. It is not AI. Generative AI and agentic AI scooped into that means that they can claim to be useful and have applications, but actually those are generally under the cover of other on the computer type things. And then we have this graph, which is, oh boy, I gonna go into full Columbo on this one. This is, we've got Moore's Law here. Moore's Law, which just hasn't been a thing for about 15 years. Like, it's extremely outdated logic. It's like, this is very much like AI generated bloody graph here. materialistic science exists. Moore's law has not been true for like a decade and a half. What is this graph saying? It's listing off some of these technology types. What is it saying though? What does it mean? What is this? What's this? What's this axis? What's happening here? I don't know. Baffling graph. And then we have this fascinating little box out about agentic AI, which makes some extraordinarily bold claims without any evidence whatsoever. Agentic AI is transformational in complex distributed operational environments such as the railway. Is it? Citation needed? They can observe, decide, and act across multiple steps to achieve defined goals. Okay. I want someone to explain to me whether this is even close to true, because my understanding of agentic AI is that it orders you 1,000 eggs from the other side of the country. Agentic AI is bad. It's rubbish technology. It's just pants. It's dead end. It's, as large language models are when applied to generative AI, it's a dead end technology. Baffled at this paragraph saying that it, making statements like this is a fact rather than agentic AI being a fringe joke technology for columnists to dip into, order eggs, waste a load of money, and then say they didn't like it. Just staggering. And this chapter kind of continues without saying much more, really. It kind of gives a little bit of a description of the role of GBRX, which, of course, it says absolutely nothing. It doesn't explain at all what the role of GBRX is. It's just the same paragraph that I used earlier. More quotes. And that's kind of, then we're on chapter 2, But we've just gone through the context. What's the plan? What is this for? What's this about? What's it going to deliver? You can't have a plan without clear objectives. It's not a plan. This is just PDF slop. And kind of, as we've just gone through one chapter, by this point you start to see one of the standout features of this document, which is that it has so many quotes. This thing is desperate for legitimacy and content, frankly. We're only on the intro chapter, and we've had screeds of quotes, including from some sensible, legitimizing industry heavyweights, such as Alex Hines and Maggie Simpson. And it's only going to get worse as we go on. This quite something. We go into the next chapter, and more quotes. We're drowning in quotes, and we'll continue to do so. I want to pull out the big method graphics. This section is on methodology. This is a method about how kind of, well, let's go back to that last page. Industry engagement method. Well, it's like, okay, foundational inputs. Well, you need to give people kind of objectives. Why are they doing this? Why are we having this conversation? Well, there isn't any of that. Areas of focus. Well, it appears to be kind of all of them. Underpinning all enablers and opportunity areas, sustainability and responsible AI, sure. Well, if you're using large language models, using generative or agentic AI, then you are not being sustainable, because those are like creating a complex of factories to crack a single peanut. Plan formulation. So this is just, okay. It's a bizarre graphic that makes it. What's this bit? What's this connecting to? What's this about? What's and why is there an arrow here and then an arrow? What is this junk? This is it's awful graphics. And here's the big one. It's the double spread of stakeholders, and we've already seen that there are some faves in here. You've got Disney, baffling. You've got Google Cloud is in here. You have the government's AI boost thing. I think that's what that is. IBM is in here. But you've got what else? Connex is a real thing. Incremental is a real thing. You know what? Let's get this on big form, shall we? So who can we see in here? It's not all evil dripping in child's blood. We've got real time trains. Hi Tom. We've got the RFG. That's a real thing. TFW. We've got TP. We've got one big circle and incremental. They actually do real useful stuff. Oddly, we've also got the defunct GBR transition team here rather than Shadow GBR, which is puzzling. And also what's quite funny is we have the now destroyed Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, RIP to them. But yeah, we've got all the big hitters. We've got the evils of Palantir. We've got Nvidia here. Big up my boy Jensen with your leather coat. The concept of sovereign AI literally invented by Nvidia to sell compute. There's all sorts of other, interesting bodies in here. We've got Kundrill, which is just IBM and Microsoft sellotape together, I believe. Okay, so it's not hugely exciting here. It's quite interesting. We do have the National Energy System Operator in here, which is kind of interesting as well. So okay, fine. Not necessarily hugely spectacular or interesting. Anyway, for at least the last kind of half year or so, the team pulling this together, this PDF together, or at least the 200 or 300 words left after you remove all the pull quotes, which I did, by the way. I actually went through and deleted all the quote things out of the PDF. One I'll drop into the Discord for the bonus people. It's kind of like an empty document. It's quite funny. It's the AI Advisory Council within GBRX, I guess. It's a nice job if you can get it. Now, who do we have here? I will note, before we kind of pick out one of the people on this list, I will note with an unhappy cynicism that I have a feeling that alongside the quotes everywhere, the fact that this page has pulled out the women supporting the Tufik and Peter show by kind of there by way of a bit of a sanitizing exercise to soften any potential accusations of kind of tech broery. I'm not intending to make this accusation to diminish any of these women, but all of the railway's senior leaders in this photo here, are men. And they aren't profiled here, or indeed anywhere in this document. I'm going to call sus on that one. Anyway, let's dive into the second page. And what do we spot? That's right, it's Dr. Laura Gilbert from the Tony Blair Institute. Bingo, that's right, it's the TBI. I think that might be a full house at this point. Let me now go back and search this document for mention of ID cards. On we trot to another impenetrable and inexplicable graphic, plotting out AI readiness. Look at this thing. What is this? What is it measuring? Though, whatever it is measuring, I always find it funny. Infrastructure engineers are constantly called slow to innovate, and yet we are in the lead on this in terms of AI readiness. Remember that this includes a bunch of stuff that isn't AI and shouldn't be called AI, such as machine learning, neural networks using imagery to detect faults, so on and so forth. PLPR episode we did a wee while back. Case in point, we've actually been doing this stuff in infrastructure asset management world for a very long time. Right, we get onto the barriers and challenges section and onto one of the main problems with this document. There are major data handling and interoperability challenges with the rail industry's data architecture. And these, they do get a slight mention, but this document does nothing to actually address those and attempt to resolve them. Nothing at all. Quotes, 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 quotes. And that's it. That's the challenges, not much of it, but that is War and Peace compared to the human-centered approach chapter, which is it's just one page, and if you take out the quotes, so that's take out this bit, take out the kind of the pull quote bit, take out this bit here, you've got just like 4 paragraphs, quite something. Unlike the foundational enablers section, which is huge and continues to do nothing to tackle the very real challenges surrounding the way the industry does or doesn't share information within and beyond its own internal and external boundaries. All of this is parsed through like an AI lens, which reduces everything to meaningless waffle. And that's before we talk about how much of this PDF was built up with the large language model. I would be very surprised if there wasn't ChatGPT or Copilot copy-pasting going on. Not many M dashes though. I will admit. I haven't seen that many, if any, when I've been parsing my way through this. I'm going to jump forwards though, because that middle bit is uninsightful, despite kind of supposedly explaining what the plan actually is. Even where it addresses things like skills, it says very little with lots of words, leaving the reader kind of none the wiser as what's actually going to happen and who will do something about it. Which kind of neatly leads on to the implementation bit of the plan, which starts with one of my favourite sections, the purpose section. Look at this glorious nothingness in 200 words or so. This is the purpose of the action plan, right? So let's read this. See if you can. Let's see how this goes. Delivering this action plan depends on organisations across the sector working in a coordinated way. Okay, that's not a purpose. You're just saying a thing. AI-enabled activity cuts across multiple organisational boundaries, and progress relies on strategic clarity, purposeful action, overcoming adoption barriers, and delivery models that reflect how the railway operates in practice. Okay, what's the purpose? The Artificial Intelligence Incubator Accelerator, we'll get to that later, has been established to orchestrate delivery in a federated model and to provide strategic alignment where system-level dependencies exist. Okay, but you've not said what the purpose is. What's the purpose? We've got North Stars, we've got connecting pathways, and this is really it. Who is going to do any of this? Like, who's responsible for this? I don't know. Someone else, I guess. And then we land on the catchily named AIIA, or AI Incubator Accelerator. What a What a nonsense phrase. Look, I'm going to zoom in on that first kind of page there of this chapter and give everyone just a couple of seconds to pause the video, sorry audio only folks, read through this and let me know in the comments if you have any idea what the AI incubator accelerator actually materially is. Go for it. Nope. Me neither. Not a clue. There's a little on what AIIA will do, but nothing on who or what it is, where it will be, or even how you contact it. We'll jump forwards a little more. Chapter 8 is a fun little one-pager. Return on investment, starting with a paragraph that rightly says, there is unlikely to be one. Let's read this one, actually, because it's about the most truthful paragraph in the document, right up until the point that it isn't. Right, let's give it a read. Understanding return on investment for AI is inherently difficult. Evidence from other industries shows that many AI pilots struggle to produce measurable financial benefit, and there is limited established track record to base assumptions on. That's correct. Then let's read this last bit. This reflects how AI behaves differently from traditional software. It doesn't. It's just software. It's the same. It doesn't behave differently. It's just software. The reason that you're not getting a return on investment is because it's shit software. That's the whole point. That's the problem. So I love that. It's glorious. It's delicious. We're closing in on the end now. We see 6 priority areas outlined in Chapter 9, to which, in my mind at least, appear to cover basically everything. And this whole section is just a bunch of expansions of these areas with 100 more quotes, a sizable chunk of case studies of things that aren't really AI again, and a couple that I would say already breach several barriers of established ethics. For example, in the deployment of AI for recruitment, I believe LNER are doing this with their HR, using tools now shown to be actively racist in their applications. So great stuff all round on that one. We get a nice final closing statement that's surprisingly quote-free. Then it ends. A very glossy nothing burger doing little for an industry that frankly needed more. We'll round off our thoughts in just a sec, but first we have to score this thing. What does it get? That's right, zilch, and it should be grateful for it. RailNatra changes transport policy for the better, and in supporting the show, you are making that change happen. For as little as $5 a month, you get the free audio version of my best-selling book, How the Railways Will Fix the Future. You get weekly bonus episodes, and you get 2 episodes of Trains Atlantic, the new podcast with me and Justin Rosniak of Well There's Your Problem fame, every month. That's at least 3 hours of extra content a month, all for 5 crisp British pounds, or your equivalent local currency. Subscribe now. The brilliant Cory Doctorow has written a terrific essay on the AI tech hype cycle that is well worth checking out. There's a link in the description. And I want to quote a couple of things from it that perfectly frame why we are seeing the British managerial class jumping so hard on AI, and that includes many at the top of the rail industry. The most important discomfort that powerful people experience is having ego-shattering conflicts with subordinates who know how to do things they do not know how to do. The fact that you're in charge is hard to reconcile with the fact that the people you're nominally in charge of tell you that all your ideas are impossible, illegal, immoral, or lethal. AI is perfect for managers who have little to no understanding of complex or technical subjects, as they can interact via simple prompts, can ignore or sack the people who correct them, and it is the perfect cover for their inadequacies, and so those who champion it hardest should be treated with the greatest suspicion. In its first year of operation, BR Research had occupied its new engineering research facilities in Derby, and its teams were refining their scale experiments into vehicle dynamics, wheel and axle fatigue. They had largely decided on the rail fastening of the future. It's up there behind me and it's in gold. Don Heath was managing tests of foundation strength under the track, and establishment of a new high-speed testing facility had begun. So far, GBRX has achieved nothing more than revealing the rot at the head of the industry and has burned a huge pile of cash in the process. Unless it rapidly demonstrates that it has a real purpose over the next 6 months or so, it shouldn't be allowed to survive. Britain already has a hub for rail innovation that is well established, has and does actual physical stuff, and is spectacularly productive given how under-resourced it is. It is truly daft that I can only say this now that I am no longer part of that team. Of course, I'm talking about test tracks. GBRX and its champions in Hendy and Mashnuk are a totem for the replacement of the real, the good, and the useful with fake, harmful junk. They are what happens when those well beyond their competence are elevated into positions of power. Now, all you need to start doing is FOIing Network Rail and the DFT for what Hendy did to the electrification programme while he was chair from 2015 onwards, because the same applies to alternatives to electrification, and we are seeing how that's playing out for people trying to use the East Midlands services right now. You replace real, proven, basic technology with fakery because it lets incompetent leaders justify their salaries and their ultimate purpose, saying no to bigger, better people on behalf of their masters in treasury. On the technology itself, rather than the personalities involved, I'll finish up with the line Corey ends his essay on, because it is difficult to put better. AI is the asbestos we're shoveling into the walls of our technological society. Our descendants will spend generations digging it out again, and the longer the bubble goes on without popping, the longer it will take to repair the damage. Everyone, take very good care of yourselves. Good night.
A particular project is the new networker units for NSE, the working test bed being Unit 7001, converted from redundant Class 210 trailer cars. This is the first EMU with three-phase drive.
Because, of course, we are talking about the Class 316, which is, well, it's interesting. You know, we're on the subject of railway testing. The 316 was a single four-car test platform that had already been one of the two Class 210 prototypes and a Class 457 as the first of the networker test beds in third rail configuration. Thus, it had been a DMU test bed, a DC EMU test bed, and an AC EMU test bed. And in doing so was, and is, because a bit of it at least is preserved, as seen here in a fairly recent state, I think, one of the most important prototypes in GB rail history. It gave us the networkers, and in turn the Electrostars, and the Aventras, and now, somewhat watered down by relentless acquisitions, the UK version of the Odessia platform. So, the Class 316, a little cheeky hero in amongst the thicket.